What's up, everybody? Dr. Josh here. I'm a doctor of clinical psychology and also somewhat of a fitness enthusiast, and today we are going to talk about a logical fallacy. Now, logical fallacies are somewhat related to cognitive distortions, which I talk about on a day-to-day basis with my students and my clients. We are going to be talking about the Motte and Bailey fallacy today. So if you've ever heard a fitness influencer or someone trying to sell you something make this big, huge, outlandish claim, only to walk that back a little bit, that's the fallacy. Let's get into it. If you're interested in that or anything psychology and bodybuilding and fitness related, check out the rest of the videos on the channel. Other than that, let's get to it. So again, just to recap, the Motte and Bailey fallacy is a debate tactic where someone makes this big outlandish claim, then walks that back and defends a more reasonable claim as opposed to the Bailey. So in the fitness industry, you might see something like train twice a day, 6 days a week for optimal gains, or train 40 sets per body part per week for optimal gains. You might see this in a thumbnail, you might see this in something else, but there is that big, bold claim that sort of catches your attention, and that's why it's used. It catches your attention. However, those positions aren't that easy to defend, and this is where the sort of Motte comes in. So when they've gotten your attention, they then sort of walk it back and begin defending a position that is a little bit easier to defend. You'll see people start adding in caveats and various sort of individual factors. So if someone was trying to sell you on 40 sets per body part per week, they might say something like, oh, also you're going to have to be, this is something you're going to want to experiment with. You're not going to want to do this for, multiple mesocycles in a row. You're going to want to reduce the volumes on all your other body parts to maintenance. You're going to want to make sure that you're in a calorie surplus. You're also going to want to make sure that your proximity to failures are in check. You're probably not going to want to go to failure on every single set. And they're going to begin sort of defending a more reasonable position. They might even suggest, like, don't start at 40 sets, start on the higher end range. We know, 10 to 20 sets per body per week is generally a good range of sort of volume. So maybe start in the 15 set range and work your way up to 40 to see if you can recover from that. But as you can see, that's much less of an extreme claim and much more reasonable. All right, so we've identified our sort of Motte and Bailey. Bailey, big upfront claim. The Motte is the more reasonable claim that they defend. Why is this important? Number one, most of the times that these are used are, one, in a debate setting, and two, when people are trying to sell you something. So if someone is trying to sell you a product or service, let's say, I used to sell supplements, like if someone tried to sell you CLA on the bottle, there are going to probably be these Bailey claims about how much fat you're going to lose on CLA. And then what you don't notice is the little stars next to the claims, or the little tiny asterisks that actually tell you to flip the bottle to the back, and it tells you all about the participants in the so-called studies that lost such a high percentage of their body fat while using the CLAs. Oh, look, they were also in a calorie deficit. Oh, look, they were also weight training multiple times a week. You'll find this in fitness influencers and sales all over the place. This is also important because this is going to be confusing to beginners. As a beginner, when you're excited about fitness, you are going to want to latch onto the things that are sort of eye-catching. And we sometimes forget as beginners that the eye-catching things aren't always the most accurate things. So I think being able to identify a Motte and Bailey fallacy is going to be important to beginners so that they're not jumping from new hot thing to new hot thing. Here is a short decision tree to help you determine if a Motte and Bailey fallacy is there, and then also if the Motte claim, the claim that is somewhat more reasonable, is actually applicable to you. So step number one, identify the fallacy. If in your gut you feel like the initial claim or the initial thing you see is a little outlandish, that is your first clue. So step number one, identify the Bailey. Step number two is you are going to want to identify if this claim is then sort of walked back or given more context and moved to a more reasonable position, the Motte. And that's what you're going to want to pay attention to. So if your initial gut response or reaction to a particular claim was like, oh, that sounds too good to be true, probably right. You're probably right. So you are not going to want to let that sort of hang out here and distract you. You're going to want to quickly find whatever the Motte claim is. So find the most reasonable claim. Step number two, you're going to want to assess whether or not that sort of Motte claim is going to impact you in some way. Is this claim relevant to your goals? If we're looking at something like, that Bailey claim of like 40 sets per body part per week, it was walk back, 10, 20 sets, whatever it is this currently relevant to you at the time. If it is, then we move on to step 2. If it's not relevant to you or your situation or what you're doing, like let's just sort of backtrack to that example of like CLA and reducing body fat and things like that. So first of all, I think the literature on that is tenuous at best. But let's say we were we were training, but we weren't actually like in a calorie deficit and we weren't cutting. Why would we sort of throw on CLAs in that situation to help sort of amplify fat burning if we're not even in that phase? If we're in a gaining phase, it doesn't really make sense to throw that on there. So step number 2, identify if the product is relevant to your current goals. Step number 3, so if the sort of Motte claim is relevant to your goals, is it evidence-based? So if you can look up various supporting lines of evidence, if you have experts who have written on the subject of said claim, whether that's training volume or supplementation, if there are meta-analyses that sort of support the sort of assertion, whatever the assertion is, a meta-analysis is a study of studies, so a large supporting body of studies behind whatever the claim is. And if the claim is low cost and low risk, then, I mean, there is a chance that implementing it wouldn't harm you at the very least. So, taking a look at your personal experience, the research literature, if you can talk to somebody who is a professional in whatever the field is, whether that, be a trainer or researcher or anything like that, you can take in their sort of clinical experience and you can take in the sort of financial impact and combine all of those things, then you can decide whether or not you want to even do this thing, whether it's implement some new training variable or some new supplement. And the last thing, so if this is personally applicable to you in this time and place for your current training status, for your current nutrition status, and you have the funds and the ability to implement whatever X, Y, and Z claim is, implement cautiously. Treat everything like an experiment. So if it's a new training variable, don't dial up all the variables within your sort of training regimen. If you're going to experiment with higher volumes in training, don't turn up the volume on all your body parts. Start small. For a mesocycle, for 2 mesocycles, for 3 mesocycles, gradually crank up the volumes on a particular body part just to see how you recover. If you are, in a calorie surplus and you want to begin experimenting with high volumes, start in a reasonable range and sort of work your way up. Additionally, with sort of personal applicability, if this, whatever it is, supplement, training variable, new thing that you want, or new claim that you want to test out, if it applies to you, but maybe not at this time and place because your stress levels are too high, or your work demands are too high, or your social demands are too high, maybe back pocket that thing and just save it for later. And again, the very last thing, if none of those things apply, if you back up and there's nothing really supporting this in the literature, all the professionals that you see or talk to or engage with on YouTube or whatever don't think that X, Y, and Z intervention or supplement do much of anything, and if it doesn't align with your current goals and or values, ditch it. Get rid of it. Move on from it. And honestly, maybe the best heuristic is if it is a big, huge, bold claim, and if it has any weight to it at all, it'll come back around again. So you can just toss that out and wait until there is enough information behind it that you feel comfortable implementing whatever that is. Alrighty, folks. I hope you enjoyed that episode on the Motte and Bailey fallacy. Remember, if you see big, bold claims gradually being walked back to something more reasonable, there might be a Motte and Bailey situation going on there, so just be cautious. If you like this episode, give me a like, hit subscribe, then also shoot me an email if you've got any ideas on anything you'd want to hear, psychology or bodybuilding related, and hopefully I'll see you in the next episode. Peace.